Okay, so I think we're officially live, everybody. So I didn't put the video up of the 30 seconds like I usually do because I'm a spanner and it's a Monday morning. Or just got Monday afternoon. Oh my word. So me and Lee are here again. So on our coffee weekly chat, and we're going to be talking to you about study technique today. So where do we even start? How about we look at previous experience first? And I'm interested actually. When was the last time you took an exam, a formal exam in a sort of
Oh,
typical, environment?
not a typical environment, but last couple of weeks ago, can't remember.
Oh wow!
When was this? So it was a remote exam. So similar to how CPAA exams are. You've got like the remote proctor that you connect to. You have like a scan of your room and things. So there's
Oh yeah.
all that kind of oddity with it. But
Mm.
yeah, I mean, a couple of weeks ago was my last exam. So I do like to, in my role, I do like to kind of try and test myself quite a bit just to stay on top of my game, just so that I'm like aware of what kind of the latest sort of test approaches and how different technology works from a student perspective. So I do always kind of like to be studying something and trying
Oh
to
yeah.
work towards something. So yeah, I am always kind of doing exams here, there, and everywhere, all bits of coursework for various things.
I don't know about you, but I definitely prefer online exams versus in that environment of where you've got to go to a certain building, a specified building, and you've got to sit there in those sort of pods of people doing your exam with a big clock on the wall. I really don't like that at all.
100%. I mean, I attempt. So probably not spoke about it before. But I did attempt to do ACCA many years ago, and that is something that really did put me off. Going to a Kaplan centre and kind of queuing up with a bunch of people who are all taking different exams. So you've got some people that might be doing an AAT exam or what have you, and kind of going in through that whole thing. And I don't know about you, and I get very nervous when I've got to go somewhere new.
Oh yeah.
If I can sit it at home, that's brilliant because I don't have any of those nerves then.
Well, I remember every single one of my exams as if it was yesterday. And I remember the sheer terror of being given the name of a building somewhere that I'd never been before for a start. And then because I was at the time I was getting the train into Liverpool, which was where most of my exams were. You then got the worry of, are you going to get the right train on time? Is there going to be strikes? Is there like all of that? So I'd end up going there mad early and then turning up, and obviously they didn't even have the equipment out ready. There wasn't a room, a note to say, go in this room for your exam. And I remember trailing this building round and round at stupid o'clock in the morning and thinking, I've got no idea where I'm supposed to be. And it was one of those exams, where you've got all of your books. Like the later you get into ACA, you can take as many books as you want into the exam because they could ask you anything, depending on like the type of exam. So I remember carrying a library of books on my back. Was like, carrying these books. I remember just when they finally let us in and they said, you can sit in this room an hour before your exam. And you always had the people in the room who were either really chilled and they weren't even looking at the study text. They were like, I'm just going to do the exam. If I don't know it now, I'm not going to know it. And then you had me who was like, reading through as many last minute notes as was physically possible. And yeah, it was just, I hated that environment. So, what did you do then, in the lead up to your exam? So what was your technique? Did you have a specific technique or did you follow a number of different techniques?
So I tend to do like a number of different things. So it's always like best laid plans of mice and men. So you start off, I'll have this amazing revision schedule where I'll be like, a few months before I'll start, and then something will come up and it'll never quite go to plan. So then I end up having to kind of rush a bit with the revision, which I think is pretty normal for a lot of people. But so my two big techniques are I write things down. So I make my own notes. So if you can translate what's in a textbook or an online video into your own words and write that down, that tends to get in my head. And the other one is to try to explain as I'm teaching it to someone. So I'll be in the shower and just kind of try and explain the concept in really simple terms to try and explain it. And I think if you can do that, it shows that you've got a good mastery of what you're trying
Yeah.
to learn. And the more you kind of, for me anyway, the more I regurgitate it, the better. I mean, my wife gets quite annoyed and bored of me going over, going over all sorts of nonsense. But yeah, the more I find that I talk about it, the more I kind of explain it to people, the better I am prepared for an exam.
Yeah. And
What about you?
see, I said before, I had a terrible study technique from school. And I was always, I was always in top sets for things, but I didn't find being in a classroom environment easy. I never did. Never learned anything in the classroom. Found every topic difficult. Nothing came to me naturally. I wasn't one of these naturally gifted intellectuals, so it would take me time. And the problem was, I got through my AAT, and that was fine because it was numbers based. I love numbers. I could do it all. I could, see the trends. The only area I think I struggled with in that was when it started getting to costing, etc. I was like, I've never seen this before. But the technique that I had from doing that, doing GCSEs, A levels, etc., did not work when it came to the ACA. And
No.
I ended up failing the first exam by like 1 or 2 marks. And it absolutely was gutting because at the time, if you failed an exam, you actually lost your job, and it was written into the contract that you lost your job. But they couldn't fire me because they'd already fired too many people. So I managed to stay.
That's perhaps an indictment of how strict ICAW are setting their exam papers.
Yeah, and it was funny because obviously at the time you've got the stress of doing your exam, but then the stress of actually, am I going to lose my job if I'm,
Yeah,
if I fail this? So I was really lucky at that moment in time. My career could have gone in a completely different direction, but it made me have to stop and think about what I was doing, and I found I am a stationery queen, so I love stationery. I love pens, pencils. I've got notepads in this room alone that I've never touched. And every time I go to WH Smith, I'll buy a new notebook, and I'm like, why? I don't need to do that. So when I was studying, I would rewrite my notes, and I'd write them 4, 5, 6, 7 times sometimes to make them look pretty, let's say, to visually appealing. And that was just the way that I'd always done
yeah,
my study. That was it. And I did questions in the question book, and that was enough to get by. And then ACA hit, and it was not enough anymore. And I almost had to put that aside and stop. So ACA is funny, and it's the same with more of the advanced, where you've got an element of not just the writing, but also the numeric, and you've almost got to get to a point where you've got to say, right, I literally have to look at all of the things in my textbook that I hate looking at, all the bits that cause me the most pain. I have to look at that the most instead of giving myself a nice, easy workbook to go through that I know the answers to and I can do really easily. So I remember sitting there in my room on a weekend looking at this textbook, and it was a big question book. It was worth like 60 marks in the exam. And I did the first question, and I was nearly in tears by the end of it because I was like, it was like a week before my exam. And up until that point, I hadn't pushed myself to do the harder questions. And I just sat there going, I obviously know nothing. Like, what is this? But it's funny, at that level, again, they give you the most ideal answer, like the perfect
yes,
written answer. And you're almost never going to get to that because you don't have the time in the exam. But
no,
that mind shift was massive for me. Absolutely. So, oh,
yeah. And I mean, not in your situation where you might lose your job, but like if your job's not on the line, I do always think it is better, even if you feel totally unprepared, to go and do the exam. If you don't do the exam, you're going to score zero.
yeah.
So it is absolutely better to go in and get that experience. Because, like you said, you do mocks, particularly at a higher level, and you read those model answers and you think, oh no, I know absolutely nothing
Yeah.
at all. But like like you said, in an actual, when you're comparing it to other students, everyone's under the same time pressure, everyone's
Mm,
in the same situation. So your answer is probably better than what you think it is. and if you give it a shot, then it's always kind of, it's always worth seeing what you can do under that kind of condition and pressure. You're never going to get that perfect answer. That perfect
No.
model answer is not a real
And
goal.
I don't know about you, but it just didn't work anyway. And just by the nature of bookkeeping and accounting, you're often told that you've got to multitask and you've got client work that you have to pick up and put down, and you're managing multiple different clients at once and their queries, questions, supporting all the rest of it. So it's kind of hammered into you early that being able to multitask is a must in the workplace. But actually, the more I learn about mindset and study techniques and all the rest of it, speaking to other professionals, I don't think we're wired to multitask. And so I don't think, trying to take on a lot of study at once or in a short period of time is ever going to imprint well enough on you to then take that into the exam. So I think doing study in miniature bite-sized elements almost is a lot better. So say doing half an hour of study and then walking away for 10 minutes and letting your brain just absorb all of that and then coming back again is a lot better than trying to do a 4-hour stint and then hoping that you've retained that same info.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but when I read things sometimes, so like it might be a consultation document or something, you'll go through it and it might be like 30, 40, 50 pages. And you'll read through it all, and then you'll get to the end and you're like, what did I read?
Yeah.
What did I read? So that idea of chunking things up is brilliant. Like that's exactly kind of how I think the human brain probably does work, is that you probably do digest things in smaller chunks, and not have like a million different things on the go to try and distract you. But it can also be hard, particularly if you're trying to budget your time. If you're studying and you've got other commitments, whether it's work, children, or personal life. It can be difficult to then think, oh well, I'll find the time to drag that. You might only have an hour or two in the week where you've got for study. So you can feel a need to like, oh right, I've got to use every minute of this study time that I've got available. But
what I ended up having to do at that time, because you say I was in work for 12 hours a day at some points and then doing my study in the evenings. That's just the way it was back then, and then you did your whole weekend was just pure study. But even traveling to work, and I was getting the train at the time, so I didn't have a car. I ended up getting to a point where I recorded myself talking through my notes, and then I literally listened to it on the train on the way to and from, and doing little things like that.
Yeah,
it's so helpful.
That's funny, because when I many years ago when I was doing Latin at school, that's how I used to learn my vocab. Is I would record myself with the Latin vocab and then listen to it back. And that was the technique I found for that got it stuck in my head, because that was one that I was really struggling with, until I found that, where I was kind of like, I recorded myself and I just listened to it.
Yeah, and that genuinely, that was one of the reasons I set up the YouTube channel originally, because when I was studying, even way back, even before getting into bookkeeping and accounting, I just wished there was a channel that I could listen to or watch and keep watching back as many times as I needed to. But back then, showing my age, YouTube was music.
Yeah.
That was it. There was no online platform. Kaplan and all of these others didn't have that online library. It was the textbook and that was it. So yeah, it's nowadays I think there's a lot more available to us for free too. That you can have access to. Just on that note, if anyone wants a certain video covering or topic, let me know. I can always do that, of course. But yeah, so how did you ever find that doing those questions, let's just say that the larger questions at the back, was more helpful to you than actually going through, that you've got workbook questions usually
yes.
in a textbook? Did you find it more or equally as useful to go back and do them both?
So both useful. I think that the shortest question, it depends what exam you're doing. So if you're doing something at a lower level, so if you're doing AAT, where a lot of it is kind of knowledge recall, the exam is going to be largely kind of, you're going to have to do the calculation, you're going to have to click the right answer from a multiple choice question, or is it going to be like a drag and drop type thing? Then those kind of shorter questions that you can practice with are really useful, and because that's the way it's going to be assessed in the exam. If you're doing like a essay type question or a longer form question where you've got to apply knowledge and maybe kind of think around the figures a bit more, then you kind of do need to sit there and work through those longer form practice questions. There's no real substitute for that.
No. And one thing that I always used to find difficult, and it's really easy to say it when you're not the person doing the exam, but is to make sure that the night before, even 2 nights before, so not just the day before, that you get in the right amount of sleep. So you're going to bed, a lot earlier, because you're going to be thinking about the exam and almost winding yourself up a little bit. I definitely did.
Yeah, I make a point now of not doing anything the night before I've got an exam.
Yeah.
So I literally just, because my theory there is, well, if I don't know it now, there's absolutely no point in me, especially for those kind of exams that require a longer form answer. It's, I just decide, right, I'm going to forget about it. I'm going to pretend I've not got an exam tomorrow. I'm going to go about my usual routine, have a sleep. But yeah, I mean, I certainly used to very much kind of try and cram last minute. I was like you with the notes before you go into the exam. But I don't know to what extent that kind of pays off. I don't know really whether it pays dividends or whether it just stresses you out even more.
I think probably. I want to say that it's a bit of a comfort blanket to do that, but I don't think that it does you any good, because I do think you stress yourself out and then you overthink everything, think, oh, I don't know that enough, as opposed to going into the exam and just going, I'm just going to do my very best and, done all what I need to do up until now. And if I know it, I know it. But
I mean, it's interesting when we've looked into some of the kind of more theoretical stuff around exams and qualifications at CPAA when we were launching our 2 calls. If you kind of look at sort of more vocational qualifications like AAT, where they've got these objective-based tests, the theory is you should be able to score 100% on those tests, because they're not kind of designed for you to sit there and kind of revise everything and try and learn it off by heart. They're supposed to be assessing your knowledge as you've got it, as you've acquired it. And it's interesting to kind of think of revision is almost like a way of can be like viewed as a way of cheating the exam, because you're attempting to then just learn it for the exam, when really a qualification is about you learning something that you can then put into practice and keep using throughout your career and your professional life. It's not just something to learn to pass a particular exam. So, I mean, I guess going off on a bit of a tangent, I guess that's a big part of your learning process, and not just kind of viewing things as like, oh, I've got to revise really intensely just to get the knowledge in my head just for this one day, just to pass this exam. You need to internalize it and bring it on board with you.
But then if you go back a few steps and you go to, like, even as far back as, is it SATs or stats? SATs and GCSEs, even that far back, they are, you kind of taught that you're revising to pass an exam, as opposed to this is knowledge that you're going to take on and expand upon later. And I know, I think it's SATs, the year 9 SATs. That's like an overall exam, and you do one in year 6, I think, to determine what class you're going into, what setting. But other than that, I think the GCSEs, I saw something online the other day about a girl who'd taken 27 A levels or something like that. And
oh yes, I saw that on BBC.
Yeah, and when she was asked about, well, how have you managed to do that? She said her and her mum would focus on one subject at a time. And I was like, well, that's great, because if I had the luxury when I was doing GCSEs or A levels of just focusing on the one at a time, of course I would pass.
Yeah.
But you're multitasking across different subjects all at one time. And that multitasking, again, that's why I don't think it works as well. But that's teaching you the wrong sort of way of approaching it, because you want to be definitely with like the likes of CPAA, you want to take that knowledge and apply that in the real world, not just to pass an exam and then leave it alone and never come back to it.
Exactly. I mean, it's difficult as well from an assessor point of view, trying to work out how best to assess that kind of practical an application of knowledge, and that you've retained it and you're going to use it on an ongoing basis. And I mean, some of it in accountancy, you do kind of look at it and think, you don't need to learn that. It's
job
it's
specific.
knowledge you're good, job specific, and also you will have that information at your fingertips should you need it. So it's quite often important context and important. It's important to understand. I mean, one thing that kind of comes to mind is like double entry bookkeeping. I think I'm a big advocate for people learning T accounts and visualizing it that way, even though in reality you're probably not going to deal with a T account because it's probably on some piece of software that you're plugging the figures into. So it's kind of like, well, is there a point in then trying to assess T accounts in a kind of closed book timed exam where somebody maybe has just kind of crammed and got that in their head for the exam, and then they're going to just leave it at the door once they've finished and passed?
And in a real world setting, you know, if I didn't know the double entry, you know, and I've been in offices in that environment before today where someone's just said, oh, can I just double check this? And the whole room's gone, yeah, it's debit this, credit this, what have you. Or if there's no one in the office, you would literally Google it and find out the why. So you've always got something available to you instead of, as you say, just in that, here's that setting. And if you don't know it now off the top of your head, then you're not going to pass, you know. That's not how it works.
No, and it's the skills that accountants need in the future as well that are, I think, is always quite a hot button issue at the moment within accountancy qualifications. To what extent it'll be true, I don't know, but there's a lot of idea that AI, machine learning, the fact that your software can very much integrate with your bank feeds. If you're in industry, you have kind of systems that are fully integrated into kind of purchasing and, you know, inventory management and all the rest of it. And whether all of this is going to end up meaning the accountant's role is more of a sort of forensic investigator role when things maybe go wrong, or a kind of check on what the machine's doing, and then very much kind of interpreting the information that the machines are kind of producing for us. And those kind of skills are skills that are not just kind of bits of knowledge that you're recalling. They're a way of thinking and a way of approaching a problem and applying knowledge. So it's quite difficult to view how that's going to be working in assessment.
The only problem to that is that if you don't understand the double entry and almost the bottom layer of the pyramid, how are you going to be able to recognize when there's anomalies in a system, or if that system's not working? You see, it's almost, you need this over here to have this to some degree, but then I wouldn't want to be in your shoes trying to work out how best to test that, because we are, you know, as a industry, we are moving more towards AI. Doesn't mean that AI is going to replace us or anything like that. It's more, we can use the tools that AI provides to help us so that we've got more time to help clients over this area, let's just say. But testing that, I can only imagine actually how difficult that is. I hadn't really thought about that too much before.
It's because, like you said, it's important to know the underlying knowledge, but then it's how can you then apply that knowledge in a modern context? I mean, like, it's when software came along. Prior to that, everyone was handwriting ledgers, journals, and accounts were a very common tool that you would use. They were an actual thing that people would write in. And now they don't, but it's still important to understand how those work, so you know how the software is in fact working. But it's kind of making sure we're, in terms of accountancy qualifications, make sure you're assessing skills and training people up with the right skill set so that they can adapt. I mean, from a practice setting, there's been a lot of change and will be a lot of change. I mean, one thing we're looking at the moment is some of the more compliance topics and things. So, I mean, for our members, we're looking at changes to Companies House. Sorry, I'm going off it.
No, don't worry, you're not at all. It's all relevant.
Yeah, about the changes of the company's house, so like director ID verification, which company's house has not previously done, extra checks on company names, checks on company addresses, possibility of them having to file a P&L for limited companies, which currently they don't, and whether that's going to be on the public register or on a private register. But one of the big things we've been talking about is not necessarily whether our members kind of understand the facts of what's happening, but rather, can you then advise your clients on that? So like now, are you going to be able to have a conversation with a client about the potential impacts of you filing your P&L at company's house, and if that information is public, what does that mean? Can you, are you happy with that your next door neighbour could see your profit figure? Potentially lenders or banks are going to use it for income verification.
Yeah.
So again, it's
Absolutely.
the application of knowledge as opposed to.
It's always something interesting that I find that when I'm talking to other bookkeepers and accountants, even about what social media posts they have out there, on LinkedIn, etc. And I'm always being asked the question of what, I want to grow my social media presence. What do I post? Or what do I say to clients? And I always say to them, think about it this way. If I was, Joe Blogs in the public, I would want to come to a bookkeeper or an accountant because I'd want them to do that job and take care of it and let me know if there's things I would need to know about, because I don't know where to look as Joe Blogs. I don't know where to research that info. So being able to communicate that in a really non-techie language that somebody's going to understand who doesn't have that financial background, being able to do that is such a skill. And actually, I've worked with many accountants who just don't have that at all. They can't interpret that information to Joe Blogs. It's just, yeah, it is a skill set in itself. But I think just as an industry, we're moving more towards that, breaking that barrier and more of giving more of a commercial advice as well as the sort of techie numeric typical historical financial data that we've always provided.
Because I don't think it's ever going to reach a point where everyone can do their own taxes. I'm sure HMRC would love that, but it's just never going to be a thing. Most people just don't care. They're just not interested. But increasingly, people are more aware of technology. They're more aware of how they can find information. They can look on Gov for information. They feel more confident using services like banking apps and potentially associated accounting software packages. So increasingly, practicing accountants need to, as you say, demonstrate value in different ways. And it's not necessarily about being, I can competently plug this into the software and make sure that it's right and get the tax right and pay your tax. But it's, can you actually add a bit more value, and can you interpret those figures? And can you explain to a client what's going on, what regulatory changes mean, and what's going down the line to impact them and stuff? So yeah, it's a different skill set that needs fostering.
We as label that the journey. So it's, if somebody can do your job, they can file their own self-assessment, they can look at that information themselves. Why are they coming to you? So are you providing a different journey for them, that, a journey of comfort to navigate that system themselves? So they're paying you to take care of that because they don't want to think about it, sort of thing, but yeah, we don't talk about that a lot. We should talk about that in more detail on a future podcast, because I think we've gone enough today.
Sorry.
Enough of your time. No, don't worry. It's me and Lee could just talk forever on these topics. So if I was to just say to you, Lee, if there was one more study tip that you could give, what do you think that would be?
Based on what we've just said, I'm going to say apply it as much as you possibly can. Apply what you've learned, whether that's just trying to explain it to somebody else, or actually, better yet, trying to use it on the job and in your actual professional life.
Yeah, and even say to your if you're lucky enough to be in practice or even industry, say to your senior manager, this is what I'm learning at the moment. Can you give me a real world example of this so that I can put the two and two together? And often they will, with no questions asked. Sometimes they might not have a clue, but 99% of the time they can definitely do that for you if you just ask. So yeah, that's a great tip. But I will end it there because we've gone over time, but it's absolutely fine. You'll find me and Lee again in the coming weeks. So just another coffee chat. We'll be talking about different topics. But if you've got questions on this, you can obviously get in touch on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, all the rest of it. And Lee's in the group as well, in the Facebook group, and you can find him on LinkedIn too. We'll have to put your contact details into this somehow, so that it's just live there for anyone to go to any point. But thank you once again, Lee, for joining me. And yeah, I will catch up with all of you in the group again soon. So enjoy the rest of your week all. Take care.